So one of the important aspects of financial freedom that we're all working for is people able to have financial privacy. And our next speaker, Reuben Yap, has been a longtime figure in the privacy space. He's one of the co-founders of what was originally called Zcoin and has since rebranded to Firo. And I'm very happy that he was able to join us at this conference. And he will talk about the on-chain privacy landscape. Welcome, Reuben.
Hi everyone. First of all, it's a great pleasure and honor to be here. Thanks for inviting me to this eCash conference. And yeah, let me just make sure that this works. Okay, yeah, great. Okay, yeah. So perhaps let's start a little bit about me. I got into crypto around 2012, 2013, basically because although I was a lawyer for about 10 years, I also ran one of the earlier VPN services which I started in 2007. And back then VPNs were kind of rare and there was a lot of stigma to say like, oh, why would you want to encrypt your internet traffic? You must be doing something illegal, right? Kind of the same position that we are in with privacy coins today. But now VPNs are so widespread, they come built into your browser and your antivirus solutions. But back then, when I was starting my VPN business, I was cut off from many financial institutions. The banks stopped me from accepting credit cards. PayPal regularly froze my account. The payment providers said that we are putting you in the same category as like pornography and gambling. We're not comfortable. And the payment gateways that would accept me charge very exorbitant fees. So back then, I was like wondering like, hey, surely there's something better, right? And that's someone who was a customer of my VPN service. Said, why don't you take a look at this Bitcoin thing? And I was like, okay, yeah, sure. Can I convert it for cash? And I found someone, I'm from Malaysia. I found someone in Singapore that was able to do that for me. I should have kept all those Bitcoin. And we were actually doing quite decently, like in the sense that we were getting like three or four transactions in Bitcoin every day. When back in 2012, that's not bad. So after that, I thought Bitcoin was private, and after going through all these headaches of having my bank accounts frozen, and even today, I'm blacklisted in my central bank, for God knows what reason. It's not because of illegality. And being cut off from the financial system really makes me very passionate about basically digital cash, and especially in particular privacy in the cash, because I always feel that once you don't have that fungibility portion, they can say, oh yeah, we're blacklisted. And this is something that I've actually also experienced myself, which we'll talk about a bit later. So, although I was a lawyer for up to like 2017, I came across this project called Zcoin, which was the original implementation of the zero coin protocol, not to be confused with the zero cash protocol that Zcash did. And I found it like, wow, this is really cool. Let me just dedicate my spare time to it. And I fell in love with it. It became such an important thing that I decided, yep, let's give up my partnership with the law firm, much to the chagrin of my father, going, what the heck are you doing? Doing magic internet money? But I've been with this project for 9 years, and I'm not a technical guy, but I run a smaller team of cryptographers and developers, and try to build something that at least is meaningful to me and hopefully to more people in this world. So that's a little bit about me. So the objective of this talk basically is threefold. Obviously, to give you an understanding of what are the current on-chain privacy solutions that are out there right now. There's been quite a lot of changes since I started. Back when I started, it was just CoinJoin and ring signatures, which didn't even hide amounts. That was basically it. And now we have so many different like ZK solutions and many other interesting solutions we'll talk about too. The other thing is that being a privacy focused project, I have been through a lot from like, the listings at Binance, HTX, dealing with a lot of the compliance teams, regulators, countries cutting us off. These are experiences that are very hard unless you have really like been in the trenches. And, I would like to share some of that as well. And just from that experience, like, if a project is intending to implement some kind of like meaningful privacy, I have some tips from all my trauma. So yeah, that's the objective is to go. And I also make a recommendation of something that eCash can possibly implement. So this quote comes from Gemini here, 2.5 Pro, because I was asking them, oh, wow, what's a good opening quote? And yeah, cash works because every dollar is accepted the same. That property is fungibility. And I think everyone's very familiar with this thing. I just thought it was funny to have a quote from the AI because who makes slides nowadays? By the way, this template, I think, is the same background template that Vin used this morning. So I was like kind of laughing when I saw his template. So yeah, why privacy, right? I mean, a lot of people, I think you take a look at right now what's happening in the Twitter or X space, like, oh, Monero's for drug dealers or for like, money laundering. Obviously, this is something that's kind of unfortunate given that Monero is I would say, number one market cap and thought leader, and like the poster child for privacy coins. And that they always embracing, well, a significant loud proportion of them are always talking about the challenging, like, yes, we are being used and adopted by darknet markets and drug dealers. This shows that we'll work, which we'll talk a bit about later. So, but it's not about that, right? Because like for me, obviously we have all this normal stuff. Like I don't want to let people know, how much I'm paying my employees, how much I'm receiving. I think that's really important, especially with account-based systems, right? When I pay something to you, you just check the address that is on. And if I'm not careful, I can look at basically every token that you hold and all your previous transaction history. And that's really horrible. Obviously with UTXO chains is a little bit better, especially if you don't reuse addresses, but it's still possible, of course, with a bit more extra steps. And, obviously all of us are kind of lucky we don't live in oppressive regimes, but, places like Iran, Syria, and all these places sometimes, and I feel that nowadays there is that growing risk. Like we're looking at things like central bank digital currencies, which are basically programmable money. And once a central bank has control of that, my bank accounts are frozen. Now the state can just like, yeah, freeze that account. And that's quite scary. Like, we saw what happened in Canada with the Canadian truckers. Yeah, that's ridiculous, right? It's whether you agree of whether what they're striking or not, it's just being held ransom. I had my account with quite a lot of money frozen for 8 months over a $500 transaction. And I had to explain to them every single transaction that I had to do to the bank, including what Magic the Gathering was and why I was spending so much money on it. But yeah. So yeah, kind of we are entering into this era, right? You may not feel it yet, but you might actually be feeling it now. I don't know if any of you have gone through a banking transaction, you're sending money and they're like, what is this for? Can you explain it to me? Yeah, all the time, right? Yeah, even I'm sending my account to another account. They're like, why are you sending this money? I said, it's my own account. It's Reuben Yap to Reuben Yap. Why are you questioning me? Oh, we just want to make sure that you're not being scammed by myself, So it's kind of ridiculous, right? Which is why I'm really passionate about digital cash, right? And especially privacy cash. I don't want people to know exactly what I'm transacting. And I actually see this as more as like a balance between the state and the citizen. I'm not an anarchist, I try to follow the laws as much as possible. But when you're giving the state too much power and giving the financial institution too much power, America always talks about, oh yeah, we have to have the right to bear arms because we can rise against the government, right? Well, if they can just freeze your money and lock you out, what the heck are you going to do if you can't even buy your guns? Yeah. Sorry? Hello. Okay, great. Sorry about that. Okay, yeah. So why privacy? I think I understood that. And this was like some things that happen. Iran obviously is a heavily sanctioned country. There had floods, and Zcoin as it then was actually used. I think it was the second most used currency after Bitcoin for donations. Of course, we didn't have anything to do with that. They decided to accept it. And I think even recently, especially in Syria, which has recently changed regime, somehow the banks right now, they only allow you to withdraw $40 per week. Can you imagine? And they're like, what the heck am I going to do? Right. So they're using crypto is more relevant to them than actual their own national Syrian pound. Right. So, this is a local pharmacy. They're accepting Firo. So I just thought it was a nice little touch. And similarly in Venezuela as well, when I heard some people were just like mining Zcoin as it then was using like a couple of rigs with GPUs. So yeah. So these are some of the myths of privacy. And again, we talked about it's not true that the main case of privacy is for illicit activity, this is the same argument that we are looking right now. The people are talking about end-to-end encryption. We should have a backdoor. We have to have some sort of scanning, right? And this, I think, is happening in Germany at the moment. And the other thing is that, this is something that Monero often says, is that criminal use shows that your privacy works, right? And that's kind of silly because most illicit activity actually happens on stable coins, right? And Bitcoin as well. And, even the way that North Korea used Tornado Cash was not done in an untraceable way. They could still trace the funds. So criminals use what is most liquid, what is most convenient for them, and that they think they're not going to get caught with. And they often make mistakes. So, yeah, criminal use shouldn't be your major bragging metric that your privacy works. So don't use that. It actually gives ammunition to those that are against privacy to attack us, right? And the way that I see digital cash or like Bitcoin or whatever, right? It needs to be a neutral value transfer mechanism. Kind of like with the internet, it's like informational value transfer. It's neutral, right? Bad things happen on the internet, but good things also happen. And similarly, cryptocurrency is that neutral value transfer. So stop saying like, oh yeah, it could be used for bad things. Everything can be used for bad things. Even a kitchen knife can chop vegetables or stab someone, right? Yeah. So yeah, now that we know why privacy is important and why I'm so passionate about it, we should talk a little bit about how we achieve these mechanisms on-chain. And what is on-chain privacy, right? So basically you hide the sender, the receiver, the amount, the transaction graph. That means like A to B to C to D. So you can hide the amount, but then you can still see the flow of funds. That's the transaction graph. And the asset type, right? For example, in Tornado Cash, when you're depositing USDC, when you're depositing USDT, you can see it is USDT, there's USDC that's being deposited in. And the last one is not really on-chain privacy. It's more like a outside layer, which is the network layer. And because of the way Bitcoin's gossip protocol works, basically, when it sees a transaction, it propagates the transaction to 8 other, what all the nodes that it's connected to. And a node that kind of looks at the entire network, especially if it's a nation state, ISP, or someone that just configures their node to connect to a lot of nodes, they can actually see the propagation of the transaction. And there's a study that shows that you can actually identify correctly the node that started the transaction with, I think, more than a 50% probability. So what's the point? You have all this other privacy when I can tie this transaction to a particular IP address. And if it's your home address, all the worse, right? That's it. Yeah. So let's look at a bunch of privacy protocols. Obviously, it's coin joins, which I would consider Cash Fusion falls into. There are several iterations of coin joins. There's ring signatures, which is what that Monero uses. There's Mimblewimble, which was really famous a couple of years ago with Grin, Beam, and I think Tari also uses it. Of course, now we have ZK-SNARKs as made popular by Zcash. Lelanter Spark, which is something we did that actually influenced quite a few other privacy protocols. And something called FCMP++, which is what Monero is testing on their testnet right now. So yeah, let's take a look. So yeah, what are coin joins? Coin joins is just basically a group of people come together. They have their coins, they deposit it into the mixer, it all mixes all together, and we take the same amount out, but then, it's not very clear whose coins belongs to who, right? And there are, of course, several iterations of this with different, pros and cons, right? I think these are the main ones that we are seeing: coin join, cash fusion, coin shuffle, zero link, and wabi sabi, right? Now, without going too much of what has happened here? What's this? Funidipus? I can't speak. Never mind. It's okay. French. So, this is just a very basic understanding. There are, I would say, some differences between the different coin join comparisons. Obviously, some of them require you to break down your amounts into fixed denominations like 111, 10, 10, 10, 0.5, 0.5. And that's generally what Whirlpool, which is used in Samurai Wallet, uses. Then there are the ones that you can use variable amounts, which means that you can break it into any type of amount. Like Cash Fusion and Wabi Sabi, which I think uses some sort of like a more advanced cryptography. And the other thing is that most of this almost all of it rely on what we call a centralized coordinator. You need that centralized coordinator. It can't steal your funds. You may get some information, depending on the implementation, you may get a little bit of information on the mixers, but it is still a centralized coordinator. And the issue with that is that, as we saw in Samurai Wallet, the government went after the people that were running the Samurai Wallet Whirlpool infrastructure and said they were facilitating money laundering and stuff like that, because previously it was taught that as long as you did not have custody, you were not transmitting money, but then are you then facilitating money laundering? Now with the Americans, they're going back against their own rulings. So it shows that, being a centralized coordinator makes you a real target for these type of things. The other problem of being a centralized coordinator, especially if someone is running the majority of the infrastructure, which for most of this is the same, is like they are controlled by a very small number of people, like Wabi Sabi, Whirlpool. These people are running their own nodes. They could be running the participants as well. And if they control a huge number of participants and also the coordinator, if they were really diligent and logging the stuff, they could tell, well, okay, this user coming in, I can de-anonymize this person because, the rest of the participants is me, the coordinator is me, you are trusting certain things here. Coin shuffle is a bit interesting in the sense that while the mixing doesn't happen at the centralized server, there's this relay server that, is helping all these nodes to communicate with each other to do the mixing. I'm not sure how a regulator would look at this, but it's just an interesting difference in the sense that, it's not actually conducting the mixing. It's just helping to pass the messaging around to make this mixing possible. So these are just some coin join comparisons. So what's the great stuff about coin join? It's quantum resistant, I guess. If you do a coin join, if a quantum computer comes around, that privacy doesn't go away. Sure, maybe you'll double spend and create coins of, you can break the signatures, but the fact is that the privacy still remains. So that's one of the benefits of this coin join type of systems. And generally, although coins that come from mixers do tend to come with some sort of flagging from blockchain analysis companies, they are not it doesn't result, Bitcoin's banned because it has a mixer, right? It's not considered inbuilt privacy. So something in the European law, there's actually this thing that says that no, VAPs or CAPs can basically list or offer for trading any sort of asset that has inbuilt privacy, right? That means stuff like Monero, stuff like Firo, stuff like Zcash, where it's baked into the protocol, right? Obviously, it hasn't really been challenged in courts what inbuilt privacy actually means, but that's how people are interpreting it right now, right? So something like mixers, which is like kind of like something else on top of it, or like a smart contract type of mixer, that's not considered inbuilt privacy and therefore is allowed under MiCA rules. So yeah, that's just something to think about. But the problems with CoinJoin is that, yeah, I don't know if you use CoinJoin. I mean, I know that some of you have. It's not a great user experience. You deposit, you wait for like half an hour or so, wait for the mixers to complete. And then after that, you still have to watch out. All right, I can't mix my post-mix funds with the pre-mix funds. You have to do coin control unless your wallet is smart about it. It's just so much work that is not approachable for the average Joe, right? How do you expect the average Joe to be like, oh yeah, coin control, this and that? No, it's horrible. There are some mitigations, but it's still kind of a hacky workaround. And the fact that, you kind of leave this liveness, this thing to happen, for half an hour, leave your wallet open, leave it thing, it's not a great experience, right? And obviously centralization risks as well. So what's next? Let's look at the first iteration of cryptographic implementations for doing privacy, right? And ring signatures is about adding noise to your transaction. So whenever I send a transaction on Monero, I have 15 other possible inputs and 15 other possible outputs, right? And the person that's receiving it knows which one, I received it, right? But everything else, from the outside perspective, it could be one of these 16 people. And this, I would say, achieves quite a high degree of privacy, but only if there's a huge take-up of it. So because in Monero, it's mandatory, so you have all these possible decoys, right? But if only a small set of it, then you have not so many decoys to pick from. But they are very well-known targeted attacks that can, even in the entire mandatory system, you can attack ring signatures. Oops, it's a video. Can you play the video? Oh, okay. Well, this was supposed to be a video of like mahjong, so kind of this was a video of people and 16 people entering into a lift and somebody farting, and everyone's like, who was it, right? And that's basically what ring signatures is, right? Like, I want to fart in the lift. I drag 15 other people in the lift with me. I fart and I'm like, oh yeah, who is it, right? And that's an easy way to visualize ring signatures. Okay. So now that we know that's about farting in the lift, so yeah, it's like adding noise to your real transaction. And the noise in this case is the 15 other people that you're dragging into the lift with you, unfortunately, right? But yes, if you just look at it on the blockchain just alone, yeah, of course it offers, I would say, a good amount of privacy. But if you are fighting against or an adversary has other metadata, maybe has access to exchange, or it knows the timing of the transaction or the amount of the transaction, or certain things like, I have access to the merchant, I have access to the exchange, these guarantees aren't so great. And you can even similar in CoinJoin, where you can be most of the participants in a CoinJoin, and therefore you can see how someone is mixing it. Similarly, there have been attacks, I think even attempted ones, where people are just spamming the Monero network, so that because he knows that these transactions are the real ones and can reduce the kind of like anonymity set by saying, these are my decoys. I know that this don't move, so I can weed this out. So that can also reduce privacy. And especially with decoy-based systems, whenever you're making repeated transactions to the same entity, either as a sender or receiver, you're actually potentially degrading your privacy. And this was actually identified in a talk called Satoshi Has No Clothes. It's done by Ian Mears, who was a Zcash scientist. And, this is one way where, in this case, I see a donation address. I want to kind of track where he moves his money. And I just send a bunch of, small little donations to this particular address. And a proper privacy coin should not be able to say, all right, when it moves to an exchange, I can tell that these came from a particular, address. But because in this case, I kind of tainted it, the chances of it all landing, especially if I've already controlled the exchange or asked the exchange to give me information, what are the chances of all these intersections happening to a particular deposit? So here in this case, there's an issue here. And similarly, a proper privacy currency, if I'm going to a store and paying every time, right? Maybe every day, they should not be able to tell like, oh, this came from the same person or the same individual, right? But in this case, if the merchants or that one merchant tries to trace back the taint and says, oh, it came from this one source, and that source has your KYC data, again, the chances of it being just a random thing is also very low. So you can say, yeah, this came from one source. So again, here, if you have additional data, these type of attacks are possible. And here, obviously, I think it's like tainted dust attack, where you send, like, I think, okay, you probably deal with this drug dealer. I'm going to send one coin to you and one coin to the drug dealer and see where these things intersect. Then I can know for us, especially if it happens several times, then I can know, oh yeah, all right, maybe that money is flowing there. So this you can also taint. So yeah, that's basically like a lot of the kind of issues with decoy-based transactions generally. I mean, Monero is aware of it, which is why they're moving away from ring signatures. But yeah, this is should be well understood, but not many people understand it because they're like, oh yeah, they always like, oh yeah, look at this transaction on the blockchain, de-anonymize it. Obviously you can't, but someone else with access to more data and more resources can de-anonymize it. And if your coin is all about privacy, then your privacy should be really good, right? Not susceptible to this type of attacks. How are we doing for time? Okay, good. Okay, so now we're going to talk about Mimblewimble, named after some Harry Potter tongue-tying spell. And it's quite nice in the sense that it hides all amounts. It has this really nice technique where basically all the transactions that happen in a particular block almost gets joined together, aggregated together, almost like it's a giant coin join. So here's a bunch of inputs and all of it comes a bunch of output in one single transaction. And that's quite nice, right? It also leverages cut-through, which means like if A to B then sends to C, the only transaction that's recorded on it is A to C. You don't have to have that intermediary B, so you can actually remove certain data from the blockchain, which is great for storage, right? And yes, it does hide the sender, receiver, and amounts, but the problem is the transaction graph privacy, which should have been solved by the coin join, isn't that great, because especially if your chain doesn't have a lot of transactions, there's not a lot of people to aggregate with, and someone that's actually observing the network from above can see, oh yeah, this transaction then aggregated to this one and see how it has propagated through the network and how it gets joined together, basically removing the coin join, right? So this is I would say a trade-off. It's a very simple implementation. The cryptography is not very heavy. It's very light. But because of this issue, it is not super suitable for those like very, very high privacy, because you can tell the flow of money went a certain way. But still, it's quite good privacy. There were some usability challenges whereby when you started Mimblewimble, both parties had to be online to do a transaction, which kind of sucked. But the new Litecoin's Mimblewimble extension blocks implementation kind of removes that requirement away. So I do think that Mimblewimble is still relevant, is great as a lightweight privacy protocol that does, I would say, like a good job of hiding privacy without like all this really complex ZK on top of it. And it's relatively easy to implement, and I think it deserves more attention, even though people have dismissed it as a broken privacy protocol. It isn't broken, it's not like the highest privacy, but it does have a lot of cool things. Like you can prune it very aggressively. It's very lightweight. So I think it's great for people to implement. I think Litecoin made a very good choice to implement it as well. So yeah, obviously we have ZK-SNARKs. I searched someone for a snarky photo and like this is what happened. But yeah. And it's basically, ZK-SNARKs is very hard to explain in the sense it's this circuit that proves a bunch of things, right? But in short, it's the gold standard of privacy, right? It can encompass, you're not hiding in a group of 16 people in the lift. You are hiding with everyone that has possibly gone into the lift before, right? And there could be billions of people and whatnot. Right? Yes. I could fart and then I leave, and the fart can appear at any time in the future, and you're like, oh yeah, who could it be? It could be anyone who went into this lift, right? So that's an easy way to explain it. And the performance is really, really good, especially with sapling, fast verification times, really small proof sizes. Proving times are not too bad, but the main drawback was this trusted setup, which means that you have to set up this ceremony. It's kind of like Lord of the Rings, the one ring. That if you had that initial parameter, you could basically create coins out of thin air. And yeah, so that's the main problem. Obviously, there are ways to mitigate that, but it's still an undesirable property to have in a solution. But it's still probably the most performant for the highest amount of privacy. Now you also have Orchard, which kind of removes the trusted setup, right? And the performance is not as good as sapling. That means it's slightly slower. But the idea, especially if you heard of Zcash Tachyon, right, is that this particular proving system allows for recursive proofs, basically like proofs of proofs. That means instead of individually verifying each zero knowledge proof, I can have an aggregate of the proof and just verify one proof to kind of represent all the proofs before. So this is potentially, very good scalable. It's a huge engineering work, and it's also very, very complex. I know, I don't think like, any project can take it on. You would need, even if you're a scientist, even you're a cryptographer, you may understand it on a high level, but there are a lot of intricacies. So this makes it very, very tough for, it makes you really, really dependent on the ECC, not the Electronic Cash Conference, but the electric coin company, right? And obviously their new proposal is still using the kind of like, Halo 2 proofs, but actually implementing the recursive proof aggregation and allowing quick syncs from mobile wallets. And you can just like sync in 1 to 2 minutes by just verifying a single proof. So yeah, that's the cutting edge right now. So how about this? This is something that we developed, which is kind of like in between, in the sense that instead of having this monolithic universal ZK circuit that proves everything, how about a modular system where, I have one specific type of ZK proof that proves membership. Then I have bullet proofs to reprove range proof. There's another proof for balance proof. And they're all kind of modularized and proving a specific thing in the network. So it's almost like a framework. And this makes it very easy to do security analysis. It actually makes it also easy to upgrade. So for example, one of many proofs is not bad in the sense that it does scale up to 64,000 instead of 16 in Monero, right? So it's quite high, but obviously not in the range of the billions that Zcash uses, but it's still very, very high privacy. But now there is a proposal to actually change this for a different ZK proof, and we can just slot it in without too much disruption to the other parts of the protocol because it's designed in a modular way. Obviously, I'm simplifying it. There's some work that needs to be done. But the fact that we can take this out, put this in, don't change the address structure, everything else remains the same, even reuse the same anonymity set, I think this is a very good benefit of this system. And obviously, this is much more suited to like open source projects that are not like centrally or not a big team, because it's much, much easier to maintain, right? And this is why this particular construction was actually was considered for use in Monero. It was called Seraphis. Obviously, they made some changes to it to fit their thing. But eventually they decided not to do it because it would have resulted in a change of the address structure, and they found a different way to do it. But it shows that, look, this is a thing where a more open source, more grassroots thing can get very high privacy, but without relying on this really, really complex ZK circuit that only a few people in the world understand. And this is all based, like, no trusted setup, kind of easy to understand cryptography, at least relatively to ZK-SNARKs. And this is what Monero is currently implementing now. It's just launched its testnet maybe like 1 or 2 days ago. And basically, it's a really nice technique where curve trees are, like a cryptographic accumulator. It's kind of like a Merkle tree. It's a shallow Merkle tree with 2 cycles of elliptic curves, and it uses basically a generalized bulletproof circuit. And it allows anonymity sets of like 150 million or so, which basically is good enough to avoid any sort of decoy systems. And it does have more complexity than, let's say, what we have with the Lantern Spark, but it's still, I would say, much, much simpler than what Zcash has. So this is kind of like an alternative than ZK-SNARKs. But again, this is not casual. It's quite tough. It's requires a lot of audits and thing. But this, yeah. I mean, similarly, like it's almost similar to Zcash. I think Zcash is like billions. This one is 150 million. So yeah, I don't know whether it actually makes an actual difference. Like when you are picking up 1 in 150 million, 1 in billion. I don't think that distinction really matters anymore. Of course, 1 to 16 or 1 to 100 versus a million is quite different. Yeah. Those decoy attacks can work, but they don't work once you hit like the really, really high thousands even. And okay, yeah, network layer privacy. I quickly talk about this. Obviously everyone's familiar with Tor, Dandelion++, which Firo has implemented, Green has implemented, Monero has implemented. Basically, instead of a gossip protocol, it will bounce the transaction to, it rolls a dice, and there's a 10% chance it will broadcast to everyone, and a 90% chance that it will broadcast to one other node only. So it kind of hides where the initial transaction originated from, but it does add a little bit of delay, maybe like, 20 seconds or so. So for, something like eCash, yeah, it's definitely more than 5 seconds. But if you want that added privacy, it's quite lightweight. It doesn't add a lot of, crazy code or all of that. And it can be enabled by default, and it can also be turned off immediately. Obviously, the highest level of privacy is mixed nets. But that to me, I think right now, it's NIM that is doing it. Now you can use it in quite a fast way, which kind of works like a VPN, but proper mixed nets actually delay the transactions. They pull transactions together before it goes out. But to me, it's a bit of an overkill. And I guess maybe only if you're like, fighting against state level actors, you might want to consider that. But you can always say, I use Tor and combine it with Dandelion. I think for like 99% of use cases is more than sufficient. So privacy obviously has compliance tools, right? And it's not about giving in to the state, it's about giving that optionality, right? One way is to have view keys, and view keys are just a way like, yeah, I can give you my view key, you can take a look at my transaction or the ingoing and outgoing. But Monero currently only has partial, it only has incoming. A few other systems only have incoming. That means you can only show the money that's incoming, not the money that's outgoing, which is kind of bad because you cannot impute balance. But, we have full view key support. Zcash has full view key support. Or another way, the easy way is transparent address. But it's great for exchanges. They're very used to it. They just implement, like Bitcoin, right? And the problem is that, as highlighted before, it's a bad UX. It's like, oh yeah, shield into the shielded layer, comes out from the shielded layer. There's this like where are my funds, which is kind of like nice with Monero where everything's just private. I just make a transaction. I don't have to think about shielding or managing that transparent layer. But, in terms of comfortable, like exchanges being comfortable, and they love transparent addresses, right? And I guess the other one that is kind of like gaining traction, especially after the whole Tornado Cash issue where the developers got arrested and, now they're like, oh, maybe we should have some sort of compliance feature to prevent bad guys from using things like Tornado Cash. And the idea is they have this ZK proof to prove that I'm not one of these blacklisted addresses and that my funds are clean. So this is being used in Railgun and something called privacy pools that's run by like Amin Soleimani or something like that. So I've used it. I really hate it, but it's one way to use Tornado Cash in a compliant manner. But please, don't. There are some systems we actually have backdoors where there's a multi-sig that can actually unlock and decrypt everything. So let's try to avoid using that. I mean, what's the point of building privacy for that? So yeah, there are real world challenges for privacy projects, obviously regulatory, technical, and delistings, which I guess is connected to regulatory, right? And obviously right now, especially from the EU regulations, even the US regulations before Trump, there's been a lot of like a witch hunt. And it's kind of silly. It's like they just want to show that they're doing something, and privacy coins are very easy to go after. We're not a huge part of the market. They can clamp down at us, and exchanges are like, yeah, it's okay. It's only like 1% of our volume, right? But if you say like, let's ban Ethereum or let's ban Bitcoin, then maybe the exchanges would fight more. Technically, obviously, they're much harder to build things on a privacy chain, smart contracts, a bit harder. You want to do privacy preserving AMMs is really, really tough. I think the only project that I know is doing it is called Penumbra. I think they just shuttered very recently. And obviously, you are always at the mercy of exchanges on delistings and stuff like that. And I can share with you some of the stuff where, like HDX, they delisted us. And then because Korean regulators said, we don't like you doing privacy coins, even though the rest of the world was okay. This was like, I don't know what year was it. And then they secretly relisted us and say, hey, we relisted you, but you can't announce it. Okay, right? This is kind of bullshit that we have to deal with. And like Gate.io, Firo is on Gate.io, but you can't search for it. If you go to Gate.io and search Firo, you can't find it. You have to go to the exact link, and then you can access Firo. It's all this ridiculous crap. And Binance, we did so many things, so we can talk about it, I guess, after it. But actually, our solution is now being used by Zcash, which kept them listed. But it was a lot of back and forth, and it's just like, why are we bowing to exchanges to remain listed? And it just felt like my balls were being held by all these big exchanges. So in a way, yes, sad that we got delisted, but at the same time, like, I'm free, poor but free, yes. So yeah, what the exchanges want? Obviously, the number one is volume and interest. If you are like 1 million volume, 2 million volume, they're not going to give a crap about you, no matter how compliant you are. You're like, regulators giving me crap. Yeah, 1 million volume, we can take it, right? But if it's something like 100 million volume, 1 billion volume, they're like, let's fight for this, let's fight for crypto. Yeah, obviously, right? This is thing. Satisfying regulators. Obviously, this is something, I have a thing against the French government because they I don't know, they really have a thing against Firo. They basically approach all these exchanges and say, we are not comfortable with Firo and not comfortable with Zcash and Monero, and why don't you better delist it or you're not going to get a MiCA license from us. And all these exchanges are, okay, what are we going to do? And they started delisting us because of French regulator. They basically forced their hand, right? But there were some other privacy coins that had the exact same features as us, like PIVX and whatnot, because the French regulators didn't see them or whatnot. Then yeah, and a lot of it, they basically just went to CoinGecko or CoinMarketCap and clicked privacy, and they're like, oh yeah, let's delist all of this. Like, for example, something like Verge XVG has 0 on-chain privacy, but they're like, they identify as a privacy coin, banned, right? Yeah. And then Verge went out with a little notice. We're not a privacy coin, by the way. We have no on-chain privacy. We just talk about Tor privacy. We're okay. And then they got relisted. But yeah, it shows you who really cares, right? Yeah, Horizon used to be a Zcash fault. They totally stripped their privacy as well. And the other thing is ease of compliance. You could have all these compliance tools. Like there's this coin like, called Salvium. Like, well, MiCA compliant. We have this cryptographic way where if the exchange is not happy, you could return it to the same address, because you can't really do that with a privacy coin because it's a stealth address. So I send it to you. You can't send it back to me. But if they have that auto return function, then it makes life easy. But exchanges are like, like 2 million, 3 million coin. Why should I bother with that? Let's use transparent addresses, dude. Right? Because if you deposit with a transparent address, you're not happy with it, they can just return it to the transparent address. So again, ease of compliance is important. And this is actually what almost got Zcash delisted because they were telling Binance, use our view keys. We can do all of this thing with the view keys. But can you imagine how horrible that user interface is? That means every time when I'm dealing with Zcash, I need to sign up for Binance and then give them my view key, which to me is worse. That means now they have my entire wallet history. Like, what the heck, right? Which is even worse. But somehow they went through our super transparent addresses route and managed things. So although you can technically satisfy, the ease of compliance is also really important. So this is the art of implementing privacy without getting flagged as a privacy coin, right? Okay. And number one, don't call yourself a privacy coin. Yeah. So eCash is about cash, nothing about privacy. Litecoin, it's about, I don't know, just it's light. Yes, digital silver. It has privacy features, pretty good privacy features, but because they don't call themselves a privacy coin, regulators don't put pressure on them. So it's really important. This is really important. Probably the most important, which is kind of stupid. And the other thing is architecture separation, right? That means if you have a mandatory way to do privacy and there's no way to opt out or no easy way to do that, that makes it really difficult for exchanges to justify it, right? And the thing about having a transparent layer, which is kind of stupid, but that blockchain analysis firms have a lot of lobbies that talking to regulators and all of that, right? And like with Zcash, so a common thing that they say, oh look, Zcash and Dash, they're supported by chain analysis. That means they can trace them, and therefore they are not a privacy coin. No, that's not what happens. Yes, there's a transparent layer that they can risk score. That's what they support, and because exchanges say, oh yeah, chain analysis supports them. We have blockchain analysis compliance. Take a box, we can keep them on. But if like chain analysis said, no, we can't do anything about Monero, then they can't tick that box and maybe we have to delist, right? So like this is important. Like, so you can have the transparent layer allows those blockchain analysis companies to make money, to say that they support your chain, but they're not necessarily that great at de-anonymizing transactions. It's just a business thing, and a regulator thing. So the other thing is that no protocol privacy, but add privacy, which is the way Ethereum or Secret Network, which is all about privacy, but their native token is not private. You have to put it into a smart contract to make it into like secret or something like that, right? And this some exchanges still don't buy that, but a lot of exchanges are, oh yeah, your coin has no inbuilt privacy. It's done by a smart contract, so it's A-OK, right? Yeah. So this is one way of it. And the other thing is control interaction, which is what we did, which is basically to make sure that exchanges don't ever have to touch shielded funds. It doesn't matter that it's one hop away. It could be shielded to a brand new address and into the exchange. The exchange is okay with it because blockchain analysis companies say, yes, they're dealing with transparent addresses and they can return it to the transparent address. And this is the thing that has, we implemented for Binance, Zcash, PIVX, and a couple other. They are okay. This is kind of stupid because the privacy is still there because you're going to an address which has no history, but it ticks the boxes. And that's more important than the actual fact. And again, the other way is to pass that risk to people like Andy and say, yeah, you run the mixers. We as the project don't care, right? Yeah. So that means like, Samurai Wallet and whatnot, they're not Bitcoin, right? They are third-party people providing services, or I deploy a smart contract on it. Yeah, not great. But it's one way to do privacy without endangering core developers as well. So this is a guidebook on how to do privacy without being flagged as privacy. And yeah, I mean, this is just my non-legal thing. It's just that from my many talks with compliance officers and exchanges, self-addressing is generally okay. Shielded exchange interaction, as long as they don't directly touch, they're okay. Hiding amounts, this is something I'm not so sure. Dash is thinking about hiding all their amounts. We'll see how regulators. Yeah, they apparently they want to do mandatory confidential transactions. So we'll see how that goes. Not sure, but yes, yeah. Yes, correct. That's right. It's mainly because the Dash core, there was this very corporate entity that was leading Dash development. They even came up with an opinion, why we're not a privacy coin. But now that is kind of back in community hands. They want better privacy. I don't know. I did tell them, be careful. But yeah. Because no matter what, if you take a look at all the studies, even though I wouldn't consider Dash a privacy coin, it uses CoinJoin. It's the same as Bitcoin, which is correct. But because of their branding before, they have never escaped that stigma. You do a LLM search, or you look at all the reports, they're like Monero, Zcash, and Dash, right? Which is very unfortunate. So yeah, since they're classified as a privacy coin, might as well do privacy. Yeah. So yeah, this is just a suggestion. Obviously, I don't care if you guys do it or not, but if instead of like subnet or something like this is something that has already been done. Litecoin has done it. It can be done using a soft fork, right? And in a way, it produces like auditability because it's like a peg in, peg out, right? So as long as the address, the amount going in, the amount going out doesn't exceed, you're still good, right? And it's lightweight, it's relatively easy to maintain, and it's opt-in, so it doesn't affect your existing ecosystem. So rather than relying on like CoinJoin and all this sort of stuff, this is something you guys can consider. That I think it's a good balance. Like gives some level of privacy that anyone can use without having to wait and whatnot. But then staying away from regulators, staying away from ecosystem issues. This is something that you guys can consider. And all the code is ready to be used. So yeah, so that's my presentation. And yeah, taking any questions. Yeah, I couldn't get rid of the credits, but it's okay. Thanks, Slide School. 네, 하모니아 같이.
Oh, so you mentioned a bunch of like you gave us a suggestion, basically, Mimblewimble. But I think we're pretty much like, we're probably going to go with a subnet, assuming that. However, then it's still like a totally open question, like what mechanism should we use if we could just like have our own thing, own consensus, on everything except on a subnet. And you mentioned like one of the last, I forgot, with the plus plus at the end. I mean, yeah, do you think that would be something that would be appropriate there? Or do you think something more like Zcash or something would be better? Yeah, that's it.
To me, I mean, this may sound like, kind of weird coming from me, but if you just want privacy, you can just use the earlier Zcash sapling thing and make it do it like Pirate Chain, right? Just do Zcash sapling. It's very, very well established. It works. It's not like people are beginning to understand it much better rather than using Zcash latest Halo 2 stuff. It's quite complex. And it gives a very high level of privacy. And if you don't care about any of these things, just make it like mandatory private and do it all there. The FCMP, to me, it has some benefit in the sense that, oh yeah, okay, it's simpler, but it is brand new, right? And you don't want to be reliant on Monero for maintenance or stuff like that. While something that like Zcash, the sapling thing, has been used for many, many years now. And if all you care about is privacy, you don't mind the trusted setup. The trusted setup actually can be used as a marketing thing, like, oh, let's all come together to this ceremony and like do witchcraft and stuff like that, right? I mean, like it feels like that, right? And I think generally it's well accepted. It's only the cryptography nerds that care about trusted setup. And I would say that for coins that not so crazy about it, just use sapling, to be honest. Yeah. Because you don't really have to maintain, you just do it once and forget about it, right? Yeah.
Short after comment, because I think both in Zcash and Monero, they had like some kind of bug which allowed like inflation or something. They did fix it in a hidden way, but it's good to pick something that is like kind of battle tested. So
yes, that's right. Yeah, I think Monero's one, I mean, the way that their bug was that if that bug was utilized, that inflation would have been detectable. It was just like a unique property of that particular bug. The Zcash one was more complicated, where there was an issue with the trusted setup with the initial sprout ceremony, which was subsequently fixed in sapling. I would say that, if sapling fails, then Tornado Cash fails and all these other things also fail. So I think you're quite okay there. And after all, if it's in the subnet, yeah,
With regards to the network layer privacy, you mentioned Tor. Do you have any thoughts on using I2P?
Yeah, I mean, I2P, I actually met the founder at MoneroCon like a couple of months ago, and I do think it's a better protocol. It's just that it hasn't have a lot of adoption, right? And it also cannot communicate outside the I2P network, right? Tor, you can communicate with the public nodes as well, but with the I2P is kind of like its own little ecosystem. And I think that even Monero, like they spend so much money trying to do I2P integration. I think it's called code-free, and in the end abandoned it for some reason. I'm not against I2P. I'm just like, after seeing Monero try to do it for so many times and other people do it, I'm just like, let's just don't over-engineer things. Yes, there may be something better out there, but if it kind of works, like, don't reinvent the wheel where the network effects are already on Tor, right? Obviously, if you want, you can use a mixnet. You can just plug into a mixnet and all of that. But I just like Dandelion just because it's kind of like Mimblewimble in the sense it's very simple. It doesn't offer like state level kind of privacy, but for most casual observers, it's pretty good. So yeah, I mean, nothing wrong with I2P. I think it's a great project. It just somehow just hasn't gained traction. And yeah, you can be amazing, but if only a couple of people use it, then you're gonna flag yourself anyway. Yeah. So no questions from the chat? No. Great. All right. So yeah, thank you very much. So yeah, hope you enjoyed that, and yeah, glad to be here, and thanks for inviting me.
Hello. All right. Thanks.